There are stories we carry quietly, not because we've forgotten them, but because speaking them out loud makes them real again. And sometimes, real is too heavy to hold. Zariah Lane was never supposed to be found. She was a name crossed out on a file, a line erased in a ledger, a child tucked away in a silence that suited powerful men. But silence doesn't last forever. Not when a girl with grease-stained fingers and a memory buried in metal finds the one thing they never meant for her to keep. The truth. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about return, about what happens when a forgotten girl steps back into a room built to erase her and chooses to leave the door open behind her. Now, let's get started. The asphalt shimmered like oil under the late summer sun, heat rising in waves that made everything look like it was breathing. In the quiet outskirts of Elkwood, Michigan, a town stitched together by rust, faith, and memories of better days, a girl named Zariah Lane walked home alone. She was 11, small for her age, and walked like someone used to being overlooked. A backpack, 3 years old and patched in 2 places, hung off one shoulder. Her sneakers, once white, had turned the color of dust. But it wasn't the clothes that made people pass her by. It was the silence she carried. A kind of practiced stillness like she'd learned early on that making noise in a world that doesn't listen is just another way to feel invisible. And then she saw it. A brand new silver Corvette, hood open like a wounded animal, stranded on the side of the old county road. The sun reflected sharply off its curves, almost mocking the quiet road around it. It didn't belong here. This was pickup truck country. Rusted Hondas and second-hand Buicks. Not a 6-figure sports car with custom black rims and a Michigan vanity plate that read VC Trone. A man paced next to the car. White. Suit pressed too clean for this heat. Designer loafers. Yelling into a phone loud enough for even the cornfields to flinch. "I don't care what it costs, Carter, just get a damn tow out here. I've got a meeting with the governor in less than an hour." Zariah hesitated. She knew better than to approach strangers, especially ones who looked like they'd never stepped foot in Elkwood voluntarily. Aunt Dell always said, if they didn't come for family, they didn't come for you. But something about the way this man slammed his hand on the hood, the way his voice cracked between fury and frustration, made her stop. She wasn't scared. Not really. Not anymore. Tucked inside her backpack was a small, weathered toolkit. A gift from her granddad, Elijah Lane, who once fixed fighter jet engines before a back injury grounded him for good. Now he fixed lawnmowers for neighbors and taught Zariah how to listen to the music of machines. She stepped off the shoulder, brushing a loose braid from her cheek. "Sir?" she called gently. "You need help?" The man turned. At first, the look on his face was pure irritation, like she was another problem to solve, another obstacle in his already ruined day. But then he saw her. Braided hair, oversized NASA t-shirt, elbows stained with the kind of grease that doesn't wash out in one rinse. He smirked, condescending without meaning to. "Thanks, sweetheart, but this is a Kate Z6. It's not a lawnmower." Zariah didn't flinch. She just walked up beside him and peered under the hood. "Didn't ask what kind of car it was," she said softly. "Just asked if it needed help." Colton Briggs, founder and CEO of Briggs Dynamics, and unofficial member of Michigan's Billionaire elite, watched as this girl, no taller than the side mirror, leaned over the engine with the calm confidence of someone who didn't care who owned it. "I'm Zariah, by the way," she added, kneeling down to look beneath the frame. "You smell something sweet. Like syrup? Little bit burnt?" Colton blinked. Yeah. Just started before the engine shut down." She pointed to a dark spot seeping into the dirt. Coolant leak. Hoses cracked, maybe worn through. Engine overheated and shut off to protect itself. Smart car. Smarter than most people. He stared at her. Zariah pulled off her backpack, unzipped the top pouch, and took out a small metal case. Inside was a roll of high-temp radiator tape, a plastic clamp, and a half-liter bottle of distilled water. "You're gonna need a tow eventually," she said, crouching beside the vehicle. "But this should get you 10 miles or so, maybe more if you go slow and keep the AC off." Colton looked down. His expensive watch read 4:27 p.m. His meeting was in Lansing. He wouldn't make it, and somehow, that didn't feel like the worst thing anymore. As Zariah worked, he couldn't stop watching her. There was something oddly familiar about her presence. Not her face exactly, but her rhythm, the way she worked, with no wasted motion. The way she squinted slightly when concentrating. The way she hummed to herself without realizing it. And then he saw it. Her hand reached up to brush a braid from her temple, and a flash of silver caught the sun. A bracelet. Delicate, tarnished slightly, with a small metal charm in the shape of a feather. But it was the engraving that made Colton's heart stop. A tiny crescent carved beneath the feather's wing. An imperfection only one man would know. He had given that bracelet away 10 years ago. To a little girl at Hope Harbor, an experimental care facility he'd secretly funded. She couldn't have been more than 1 or 2 years old. Her name had been Zara. They told him she was bright, dangerously bright. And then Hope Harbor had shut down. Overnight. Scrubbed from databases. Employees gagged. Children reassigned. One nurse had vanished without a trace. Diana Lane. Colton's voice cracked. "Where'd you get that bracelet?" Zariah looked down. "It was my mom's," she said. "My real mom. She died when I was 5. My grandma gave it to me. Said it was a promise. That someday I'd understand." Colton felt the air leave his chest. She didn't know. She didn't remember. And for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about the next meeting or the next acquisition. He was thinking about a decision he made a decade ago. And the girl standing in front of him, who was never supposed to exist outside the file he signed. He cleared his throat. "Zariah, can I drive you home?" She looked up at him, uncertain. "You're not from around here." "No," he admitted. "But I'd like to know where you are. Now." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. The ride home was quiet. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that fills the air when something larger than both people is sitting in the back seat. Zariah sat, with her hands folded, eyes locked on the window. Her neighborhood Cedar Heights was coming into view. It was a tight-knit cluster of double-wide trailers, corner stores that sold more lottery tickets than groceries, and kids who learned early how to read faces before they read books. Colton glanced at her. She hadn't said a word since getting in the car. Just gave him the street name, then looked away like she was bracing herself for something she couldn't name. He stopped the car in front of a pale blue trailer with a crooked mailbox and a wind chime made from soda can tabs. "Is this it?" he asked gently. Zariah nodded. "Yeah." She opened the door, but paused when he reached into his suit pocket. "This is my card," he said, offering it with 2 fingers. "If you ever need anything. Questions, school stuff, anything at all." She took it slowly, not quite trusting, but not rejecting either. "Thanks," she said, almost a whisper. Then she slipped out, and just like that, she was gone, bare feet tapping up wooden steps, the screen door slamming behind her. Colton sat there for a moment, hands trembling on the wheel. He hadn't felt like this in years. Not fear, not guilt. Shame. He pulled out his phone, scrolled past texts from executives, calendar pings, a message from the governor's office. He found the number he hadn't used in almost a decade. "Ramirez," he said when the line picked up. "I need everything you can find on a girl named Zariah Lane, born around 2013. Her mother's name was Diana Lane. She might have been a nurse. Start with Hope Harbor." There was silence on the other end. "You sure about this, sir?" Ramirez asked finally. "No," Colton answered. "But do it anyway." Inside the trailer, Zariah sat on the floor of the back bedroom, knees pulled tight to her chest. She stared at the card in her hand. Colton Briggs, founder, Briggs Dynamics. It didn't make sense. Why would a man like that remember a bracelet? Why did his hand shake when he looked at it? Her grandmother, Lorraine, was in the kitchen frying okra. The smell filled the whole house, but Zariah had no appetite. She waited until she heard the click of her grandfather's recliner, then reached beneath the floorboard under the rug. It creaked, just like it always did, and there tucked between insulation and silence was the old lockbox. She pulled it out, heart thudding, and opened it with the key her grandmother kept hidden in a sewing kit no one touched. Inside, a birth certificate, a photo of a younger Diana with a baby, and one letter. The envelope had yellowed with time. Her name was written on it, in the kind of cursive people don't use anymore. For Zariah, when she starts asking. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. My sweet girl, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't keep my promise. I always told you we'd have more time, but time was never something they gave us. Not once they realized what you could do. You were born in a place called Hope Harbor. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, but it wasn't. It was a project. You, and others like you children who learned too fast, solved puzzles before you could walk. We were part of something dark. They wanted to patent your mind, Zariah. Measure it. Own it. So I ran. With you in my arms, and a tracker buried in your bracelet I hoped they'd never reactivate. One day, someone might come looking. If that day ever comes, don't be afraid of what you are. Be afraid of forgetting who you are. Zariah stared at the page until the words blurred. No one had ever told her she was adopted. She thought Diana had died in a fire at the hospital where she worked. That's what everyone said. But the truth was different. Diana hadn't just died. She'd disappeared for Zariah's sake. And now the past had come knocking. She folded the letter back, hands stiff, and tucked it into her pocket. She didn't cry. Not yet. But something inside her went quiet. Across town, Colton Briggs sat in his penthouse apartment, staring at a photograph. A grainy image from the Hope Harbor archives. A child with wide eyes and curls that didn't know where to go. A bracelet on her wrist. Project Zara 9. He remembered how she could assemble block circuits in seconds. How her favorite toy was a screwdriver. How she always hummed the same off-key lullaby, even when she didn't know what fear was. He also remembered the day the program was shut down, how his father, Walter, came into the room and said, "We've sold the property. It's been deemed non-essential. The military's pulling out." And just like that, the children vanished into paper trails, adoption transfers, medical records, lost in a system migration. Colton had buried her, until today. His phone buzzed. Ramirez again. "I've got something. You're not going to like it." "Go ahead." Diana Lane died in a single car accident 2 years ago. Brakes failed. But get this, witness says she reported being followed 2 days before it happened. Records disappeared. No insurance investigation. No autopsy on file. Colton closed his eyes. What about the child? Legally? Doesn't exist. No adoption records. No school enrollment under that name before 2019. It's like someone scrubbed everything. And Hope Harbor? Ramirez hesitated. There's chatter online. A journalist, Tasha Quinn. She's looking into a series of orphanage closures from 2013, all connected to Project Halcyon. She's got maps, timelines, interviews. She knows something. Get me her number. That night, Zariah sat in the garage with her granddad. The fan buzzed overhead, and the walls smelled like old oil and stories never told. He handed her a screwdriver. "Fix that busted radio for me, Z." She took it silently, opening the back panel, hands moving with muscle memory. Wires, coils, a fractured transistor. Easy work. Her mind was elsewhere. "You okay?" Elijah asked. She didn't answer. He leaned back in his chair, exhaled slow. "Your mama was smarter than any 10 people I ever met. And you got her eyes, but your own fire." Zariah bit her lip. "I met someone today," she said. "His name was Colton Briggs. Said he owned the car I fixed, but I think he knew more than he let on. About me. About my bracelet. Elijah froze. Did he touch you? No, she said quickly. Just looked at it. Gave me his card. She handed it to him. He turned it over slowly. Well, damn, he whispered. Briggs. You know him? Elijah stood and walked to the drawer near the sink, pulled out a folder he hadn't touched in years. Inside were articles, contracts, a letter from Diana marked, "In case of contact, emergency only." He sat down. It's time we told you everything. The next morning, a black SUV pulled up across the street from Jefferson Elementary. Two men in matching gray suits sat in the front seat, eyes locked on the schoolyard. That her? The driver asked. The other man nodded. Yeah. Braids. Bracelet. That's the girl. Inside the classroom, Zariah felt it before she saw it. A shift in the air. The way the teachers glanced toward the window, pretending they hadn't. The way the office called her name over the intercom too quickly. She didn't wait. She packed her books, slipped out the back door, and headed straight for the alley that cut behind the playground, where the delivery trucks came through, where nobody looked twice. At the end of the block, her granddad's truck waited. Elijah had parked it there before school even started, because Diana once told him, if they ever find her, they won't walk in. They'll wait outside. He opened the door without a word. She climbed in, breath caught in her throat. Where are we going? She asked. He didn't answer until they were 10 miles out, on a dirt road that used to be part of an old railway. To see someone your mother trusted, he said. Tasha Quinn wasn't what Zariah expected. She thought investigative journalist meant someone with perfect hair and a lapel mic. But Tasha wore combat boots, a flannel shirt, and her laptop bag was covered in stickers that said things like, "Silence protects power," and "Ask better questions." They met in a borrowed cabin on Lake Marquette, surrounded by pine trees and fog thick enough to erase the world. Tasha opened her laptop. The first image that appeared was a faded sign, Hope Harbor, a sanctuary for every child. I've been digging into this place for 2 years, she said, eyes locked on Zariah. But until now, I didn't have a name or a face. You changed that. Zariah shifted in her seat. I didn't ask to be part of anything, she whispered. Tasha nodded. None of you did, but they made you part of something anyway. She clicked to the next slide. Dozens of names. Photos of children. Not all had last names. Some were labeled only as Project 7, 8, 9. Next to Project 9 was a baby photo. Wide eyes. A bracelet with a tiny feather. Zariah didn't need confirmation. She felt it in her bones. This isn't just about you, Tasha said softly. It's about every kid they erased. At the same time, Colton Briggs was staring across his father's desk in downtown Detroit. Walter Briggs still ran the room like he owned every brick in it. Even in retirement, his voice could quiet a boardroom. What the hell is this about? Walter barked, tossing a file on the table. Why are you digging into a closed project? Colton didn't flinch. Because one of those closed files just fixed my car with a roll of tape and a water bottle. Walter leaned back slowly. Don't get sentimental, Colton. That place was a liability. She was a child. She was an investment, Walter snapped. They all were. Intellectual property with soft bones. Colton's jaw clenched. That wasn't the deal. We were supposed to support gifted kids, scholarships, research. Not this. Walter smiled coldly. You think those government grants came from building playgrounds? You think Prometheus Labs was about hope? Colton stood. I'm going to the press. No, you're not, Walter said. Because you signed every document. You approved every acquisition, every transfer. You go down with me. There was a pause. Then Colton reached into his bag and pulled out a flash drive. Then I guess I'm taking both of us down. The next evening, a live stream went viral across Michigan. It wasn't flashy. No intro music, no dramatic edit. Just a girl, 11 years old, sitting in a folding chair in a garage full of tools. A soft desk lamp lit her face. Her voice was calm, almost too quiet. "My name is Zariah Lane," she said, "and I was born in a place called Hope Harbor. They told me I was adopted, that my mother died in an accident. But the truth is, she saved me. From them." She held up the bracelet, then turned it over. A small latch clicked open. Inside was a micro storage chip. They thought this bracelet was just a keepsake. But my mom hid the files in here. Every document, every meeting, every name. Tasha Quinn's voice joined in from off-screen. "We verified the files. What Zariah found exposes illegal experimentation, falsified adoption records, and collaboration with military contractors. This is the blueprint of a system that tried to own the future by rewriting childhood." Zariah looked straight into the lens. "You tried to make us disappear, but we remember." In the conference room of Briggs Dynamics, panic erupted. Lawyers shouted. Phones rang off the hook. PR executives drafted statements they didn't believe. And at the center of it all, Walter stood frozen. On the main screen, a grainy security video played. It showed Diana Lane Zariah's mother sneaking out of Hope Harbor with a baby in her arms. The timestamp, 2:17 a.m., March 18, 2014. Seconds later, another clip showed Walter pacing. "Find the nurse," his voice ordered. "The child has high potential markers. She can't go off-grid." The final image was a spreadsheet. Names, ages, IQ estimates, codes for behavioral compliance score. Next to Zariah's line, exceptional spatial reasoning, auto, mechanical intuition, project priority, high. Zariah didn't watch the chaos unfold live. She was outside, staring up at the stars. She thought about her mother, about the woman who gave up everything to protect her from being turned into a patent. She thought about the other kids, the ones she'd never met, the ones still lost in systems that refused to say their names. And then her granddad joined her. "You shook the ground, girl," he said quietly. She didn't answer. He put his arm around her shoulders. "It's okay to be scared after an earthquake, but look how much still stands." The next morning, federal agents entered Briggs Dynamics headquarters. Walter Briggs didn't resist. He simply asked one question. Did she really fix the car with a roll of tape? The agent didn't answer. As they cuffed him, his eyes drifted to a framed newspaper on the wall. The headline read, "Innovation is in our blood." And suddenly, it felt more like a confession than a promise. 2 weeks had passed. The headlines had begun to shift. What once read, "Girl exposes billion-dollar scandal," now said things like "healing after Hope Harbor" and "justice in the hands of a child." But Zariah wasn't reading the news. She was in the garage again, her sanctuary, kneeling beside a busted table fan from 1984. The motor was rusted, the blades bent. She wasn't fixing it for anyone. Just wanted to see if she could bring it back to life. Behind her, her granddad stood in the doorway, holding an envelope. "This came for you," Elijah said. "From Lansing." She wiped her hands, opened it slowly. Inside, a formal letter. The state of Michigan was offering Zariah a full academic scholarship through high school and early admission to any public university in the state. She read it, then folded it, and tucked it away without a word. Elijah looked at her. "You're not excited?" Zariah shrugged. "It's nice, but that's not what I want to do." He tilted his head. "Then what?" She looked up at him. "I want to build something, like Mom wanted. A place where kids like me don't have to survive secrets to be seen." Colton Briggs sat alone in his office. Not the penthouse in Detroit. That was gone sold, along with his shares in Briggs Dynamics. This space was smaller, quieter. A single room above a hardware store in Grand Rapids. No assistants. No board meetings. Just a man with a laptop and a long list of things to atone for. He was reading an article in the Lansing Chronicle titled, "From Whistleblower to Architect, How Colton Briggs is Rebuilding with Purpose." It felt strange. He didn't want a redemption arc. He didn't want sympathy. What he wanted was to give back the time he had stolen. That afternoon, he stood in front of a group of city council members and educators, pitching the Laneway Initiative, a nonprofit named, not after himself, but after the girl who cracked open the silence. "We're not here to rescue kids," he said into the mic. "We're here to equip them, not with press releases or performative grants, but with labs, tools, mentors who listen, and room to build the future without asking permission." The room went still. No one clapped. But one older teacher stood up and said, "When can we start?" Zariah didn't give speeches. She didn't need to. Instead, she walked through an empty lot at the edge of Elkwood, where the old scrapyard used to be. The smell of rust still lingered in the dirt. She held a printed sketch in her hand, a blueprint for a center. Not a school, not a charity. Something new. Part workshop, part safe space, part idea factory. The name written across the top. The Zariah Lane Center for Youth Invention. Her grandma had cried when she saw it. Elijah had just nodded and said, she'd be proud. Construction hadn't started yet. The permits were slow, and the donations came in one envelope at a time. But it was real now. Because for the first time, Zariah wasn't just fixing things people gave up on. She was building something no one could take. The man who once tried to own her future now sat in a courtroom. Walter Briggs. His cuffs matched the steel in his voice as he pleaded not guilty to all charges: child endangerment, illegal human experimentation, government fraud. He said it was all a misunderstanding, miscommunication, mismanagement. But the evidence said otherwise. So did the testimonies of 10 children, now teenagers, who had been part of Project Halcyon and remembered every test, every injection, every talent assessment they were told to be grateful for. Zariah didn't attend the hearings. She had other things to do, like soldering a solar panel for a new water pump in her community garden, or writing letters to the other kids she now knew by name. Mia in Flint, Jamal in Oakland, Trinity in St. Louisiac won a piece of a puzzle they never asked to be part of. They wrote back, and none of them talked about revenge. They talked about robotics teams, about community workshops, about poetry slams and ideas too big for one zip code. Colton visited Diana's grave for the first time. He brought no flowers, just a copy of the center's blueprints, folded neatly. "I failed you," he said softly, kneeling. "And I failed her, but she fixed that." He looked down at the soil. "Zariah doesn't want me to speak for her, but I promise you what she's building will outlast every lie I ever helped write." The wind moved through the cemetery like an answer. He stood, left the plans by the headstone, and walked away not to disappear, but to begin again. On a rainy Tuesday, Zariah stood at the edge of the lot as the first construction trucks rolled in. She wore a yellow poncho, 2 sizes too big, and held a clipboard like it was made of gold. A reporter asked if she had a statement. She thought about it, then said, "Real change doesn't need a megaphone. It needs a blueprint." And then she went back to work. 5 years later, the wind rolled off Lake Marquette in slow, thoughtful waves, brushing against the steel and glass exterior of the Zariah Lane Center for Youth Invention. The building stood where an old scrapyard used to be. Now, it gleamed with purpose solar-paneled, covered in vines, buzzing with the soft hum of creativity. Inside, a girl adjusted the lenses on a microscope for a group of younger students. She was 16 now, taller, still quiet, still carrying the same bracelet on her wrist. Zariah Lane didn't walk through her center like she owned it. She walked like someone who remembered what it was like to be invisible in a room full of people who thought they knew better. In the East Wing, a wall-sized mural told her story but not with her face. Instead, it showed hands. Brown hands, small hands, grease-stained fingers holding tools, wires, pencils, ideas. Above the mural, a line written in bold, brushed paint. Every child deserves to be more than remembered. They deserve to be built into the world. The center didn't just teach science or engineering. It taught voice. It taught presence. And it had rooms named not after donors, but after children. The Diana Lab, the Mia Workshop, the Elijah Sound Studio. Every space, a monument to someone who once wasn't supposed to matter. That morning, Colton Briggs stood in the corner of the main hall, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, handing out soldering kits to a group of visiting teens from Ohio. He hadn't given a speech in over a year. He didn't need to. The kids didn't care about his last name. They cared about what they could build, and he was there to hold the flashlight when they needed it. Tasha Quinn was now the Director of Ethics and Student Advocacy at the center. Her old boots still squeaked down the hallway as she made her rounds, reminding students, truth without action is just decoration. And at the far end of the building, Zariah's office was a tiny glass room filled with old radios, soldering irons, and whiteboards covered in scrawled ideas that didn't have titles yet. She rarely used the office. Most days, she was in the garage wing, tinkering, laughing softly with younger inventors, or listening more than she spoke. She had 3 patents now, all open source, all filed under Lane Collective. Not one of them bore just her name. In a federal prison 3 states away, Walter Briggs sat alone in the library, watching a muted television as news covered the graduation ceremony of the Laneway Initiative's first national cohort. 12 students, 7 different states, all first-generation college applicants, all given space to build things that had once only lived in their heads. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He just stared at the screen as if it were broadcasting a version of the world that had moved on without him, which, of course, it had. Back at the center, the graduation hall was filled with folding chairs, home-cooked food, and children dressed in their besom ties too tight, others in mismatched socks and confident smiles. Zariah took the stage quietly. She didn't hold a speech, just the bracelet. She turned the tiny latch on its side now worn smooth from years of sand, revealed the chip that had changed everything. It started with a bracelet, she said softly. A hidden file. A girl who knew how to fix things. She paused. But fixing is just one part of the story. Some things can't be fixed. They have to be redesigned. She looked across the crowd at kids who once thought talent came with a price tag. At this center, we don't just teach what to build. We teach why it matters. And that begins with remembering every hand that held us up along the way. Applause rippled gently. Not thunderous, just real. That night, a letter arrived at Zariah's desk. No return address. But she recognized the handwriting. Victoria Briggs. The daughter Walter had kept out of the spotlight. The one who changed her last name and became a federal prosecutor. The one who helped take her father down. Zariah opened the envelope. Zariah, you should know your testimony helped us uncover 4 more facilities, just like Hope Harbor. We've secured the safety of 41 children so far. Some have gifts, some don't. But all of them deserve the same thing, choice. There's a small group in Oregona, a little older than you. They'd like to meet you. When you're ready. Zariah folded the letter, tucked it beside the bracelet, and exhaled. Later that week, she stood outside the center, watching the last bus pull away from the graduation ceremony. Her granddad leaned on his cane beside her. You did it, Z, he said. She shook her head. We started it. He smiled. You gonna keep going? She nodded. Until every child walks into a room and never has to wonder if they belong there. They stood in silence for a long time, and as the sun dipped behind the roofline, the wind caught the corner of a newly unveiled sign hanging above the door. In brushed steel letters, it read, "Every talent deserves to flourish. Every child deserves freedom." A promise, etched into glass, so it could never be hidden again. Sometimes the most extraordinary revolutions don't begin with power, but with presence. With a quiet girl who chooses to build instead of burn, who believes that even in a world that forgets your name, your purpose can still echo louder. Zariah's story isn't just about exposing the truth. It's about choosing what comes after. The quiet rebuild. The dignity of doing the work when no one's watching. The decision to leave a door open for the next child who wonders if they'll ever belong. And maybe that's where hope lives, in the small rooms we name after the people the world once tried to erase. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you reflect, remember, or simply consider subscribing to our channel. We share stories like this because they remind us what resilience really looks like. Leave a comment. Tell us what part of Zariah's journey stayed with you. And if it moved you, share it with someone who needs to believe that change is still possible. Because as Zariah once said, we don't just teach what to build, we teach why it matters. Stay tuned.